Thank you, Claire. Pride in the newsroom. There you go. It is time for the France 24 debate. You need a strong constitution to keep up with Egypt's political showdown, a showdown that's come to a head in the country that's home to nearly 1/4 of the Arab world's population, with the secular opposition boycotting last week's rushed draft of a new constitution. It's on to a December 15th referendum to approve the Muslim Brotherhood-backed document. Unless the Supreme Constitutional Court, whose members were appointed under the old regime, decides to brave hostile crowds and invalidate the work of an assembly whose legitimacy is being challenged in the courts. Now, both sides have their backers. One man has made his move, Mohamed Morsi, who wasn't even the Muslim Brotherhood's first choice candidate for president and who so far has reined in the military, brokered a truce for neighboring Gaza, and so far remained one step ahead of those hostile judges. Today in the France 24 debate, it's Egypt under Morsi, and with us to talk about it from his home constituency of Luxor, Abdul Mawgoud Dardari, member of parliament from the Muslim Brotherhood's Freedom and Justice Party. Thank you for joining us. Thanks as well here with us, Egyptian-American attorney Shirin Foti. Political scientist Eberhard Kindler is with us, as is France 24 senior correspondent Mathieu Mabin, fresh back from Egypt. The France 24 debate, where you can always join the conversation on Facebook or Twitter, our hashtag debate. Tuesday, it'll be the opposition staging a massive general strike in Egypt. Over the weekend, it was pro-Morsi supporters who rallied outside a hostile constitutional court. Mark Thompson filed this report.
Protests on the streets and protests in the courtroom.
We have decided to boycott the supervision of the constitutional referendum.
Egypt's Supreme Constitutional Court was set to rule on the legitimacy of the body that drew up the country's new constitution, but Cairo's top judges condemn a decree imposed last month which shields President Morsi from judicial review. The court also announced an indefinite strike, lashing out at what they called psychological pressure from protesters.
For the judiciary to suspend its daily work is a very strong and clear message of how abhorrent the practice by President Morsi and the Muslim Brothers.
Outside the Supreme Constitutional Court, Islamists vent their anger.
I'm here to support the president and put pressure on the Constitutional Court. The judges were appointed by Mubarak. They want to bring Egypt down.
Sunday's confrontation, the latest episode in a months-long standoff between the country's judiciary and Egypt's new Islamist rulers. Last spring, judges disqualified the first Constituent Assembly. Then, in June, the Supreme Constitutional Court dissolved the lower house of parliament, dominated by the Muslim Brotherhood.
As you see in that report, for months, the drafting of a new constitution, Eberhard Kindler, seemed to lag, and suddenly everything went into fast forward last week with that marathon, 19-hour session to approve the draft constitution. Sort of a strange twist.
Well, I suppose drafting takes time normally, not in these days, I suppose, in Egypt, because largely this is a political decision, and Morsi now needed a quick response to the judges, and I think that's why the process was speeded up.
The process speeded up with today the Supreme Judiciary Council agreeing to delegate judges to oversee the election. But at the same time, there seems to be competing constituencies, because there's the Constitutional Court right now, which is not sitting as of a few days ago. And then there's the Supreme Judicial Council. So you have these two sort of competing jurisdictions. Abdul Mawgoud Dardari, thanks for joining us. We bit of technical issues at the top. I hope you can hear us okay here in Paris.
Yes, I can.
Right now, the Constitutional Court is not sitting. If they do decide to sit, is there a chance that they could scuttle that December 15th referendum?
I doubt it. They will be playing against the people of Egypt. And that's the problem the Constitutional Court created a few months ago when it decided to get politicized and to dissolve the People's Parliament. 32 million people elected us. We became the members, the representatives of the people, and all of a sudden, Mubarak's court came to dissolve us to disturb the democratic process in Egypt. I think they would make a big mistake if they try to do this. One thing new in Egypt now is the people's factor. People during Mubarak era, the forces, the army, the police, or the judiciary did not really care that much about what people say. After the revolution, it matters a lot for everyone in Egypt, and people have to pay special attention to what the majority of the Egyptians want.
Shirin Foti, what's your prediction?
Well, the majority of the Egyptians have voiced their concerns. We have two main camps that are competing against each other. Obviously, the religious, the more Islamicist groups, and the secular groups. And we saw the secular groups out in full force last Tuesday, I believe it was. And something that's very clear here is that the Supreme Constitutional Court has not gotten politicized all of a sudden. What we're seeing is Morsi acting in an unprecedented manner, seizing powers which are outside of his jurisdiction, which completely upset the balance of the separation of powers. In any political system, what you have is a legislative branch, an executive branch, and a judicial branch. And the powers of each branch balance each other so that no one individual or no one representative of those branches has too much power. Morsi has acted very clearly against this in attempting to appropriate as much power as possible for his own personal gain, and the court has responded to that. And so the court is not acting as a political body. The court in Egypt is traditionally a very independent body. Even under Sadat, under Nasser, the court has had its own independence that is very clearly marked. So we're not seeing this, what is being characterized as a politicization. It's more a reaction to an illegal action by the president.
Abdul Mahmoud Dardari, your reaction?
Yeah, not at all. Maybe you're not really familiar with the Egyptian scene. The politicization of the judiciary was even before Morsi came into the picture. The dissolving of the parliament took place before Morsi even was elected. When I was in the parliament myself as an MP, we did hear people in the judiciary expecting the parliament to be dissolved, and their claim was because it had too many Islamists. This language belongs to the past, belongs to Mubarak's era, belongs to dictatorship, not to democracy. Egyptians have decided to go the democratic way. Unfortunately, the judiciary or some corrupt elements of the judiciary are trying to politicize their work. This is not going to be accepted by the people of Egypt. President Morsi is the president of Egypt. He did not take any illegal action. He's protecting the goals and the objectives of the revolution, and he's working for stability. We have to move. Dear previous speaker, you just don't know the suffering the Egyptian people are suffering from the instability and from playing with the will of the Egyptian people. No one on earth is allowed anymore to play with the will of the Egyptian people. When millions went to the ballot box and they choose the democratic process, elected us, we had the right to be there. And they prevented us from this right. And it is very unfortunate that so-called Egyptian liberals are not willing to play with the democratic process. They're very illiberal, very undemocratic too, and they really have to learn the game and they play with it and play an ethical role in playing with democracy. So when they win, they welcome it. When they lose, they don't welcome it. That is not democracy. That is not liberalism as I studied it myself.
And it's democratic to seize powers of the executive branch completely without any restriction. It's democratic to have the rule by Islamicist parties and not respect the independent parties, not respect the minority Christian population and other populations that are non-secular, that are secular as opposed to religious. That's democratic, I assume.
Let me just bring in Eberhard Kindler.
Wondering, if we go back a little in history, we see that the same court, which today is said to be polarized and politicized, dissolved parliament at least twice under Mubarak. So I'm wondering how politicized this court can be.
A comment on Twitter from Samar Alatrouche, correspondent for the French news agency AFP. He says judges have gone in and ruled on controversial cases before with rowdy crowds outside. No problem. Eberhard Kindler, the fact that the Constitutional Court is right now boycotting its work, what's your thoughts on that?
Well, it's not really boycotting its work. I mean, it's being prevented from sitting in its own chambers. And of course, one cannot expect a court to render judgment under these conditions.
That's not what the government says. The government says that, of course, they can go and sit.
Well, I mean, in that case, I suppose the government has to make sure that the judges can access their offices.
The situation, as you saw it in Cairo, and not just in Cairo, because you also visited the Upper Nile and Alexandria, Mathieu, this polarization that we've witnessed here on our set, is that generally what you saw?
It is very, very difficult because you cannot sound the population in Egypt. You have to go to it. That's what we tried to do. And I have to be honest, when you go on the street in Cairo or in Alexandria, you feel that the streets wants this constitution. You feel that the street wants Morsi.
Why?
Last Saturday,
why
2
is
days
that?
ago, there was 2 big demonstrations in Cairo. One in Tahrir Square, in Meydan Tahrir, which is the place of the revolution, the symbol of the revolution. And outside this place at Cairo University, the Muslim Brotherhood called the supporters to gather. The population was just huge to the Muslim Brotherhood demonstration. Absolutely huge, hundreds of thousands of people, maybe twice, 3 times the number you could count on Tahrir Square. So what you feel when you are just an observer, you're just a witness of the Egyptian story at the moment, is that the street wants the Muslim Brotherhood. The street wants Allah. That's it. Morsi is the candidate of God, and this is what the street feels. And the lower class feels like this. And remember, we know Cairo, we know the big cities in Egypt, but most of the people live on the countryside. Most of the people have never been to school. Most of the people go to mosque every Friday. And what do they hear in mosque? They hear the imam saying, okay, you want to be a good Muslim? Go to the polling center and vote for Mr. Morsi. Go to the polling center and accept his constitution, which says in Article 2 that Sharia law is the law.
All right, Article 2, basically the same as under Mubarak. It says Islam is the state religion and Arabic its official language and the principles of Islamic law its primary source of legislation. There's also, though, Article 43. Freedom of belief is safeguarded. The state guarantees freedom of performing religious rites and establishing houses of worship for heavenly religions. Shirin Foti, is this so different from what was there before?
There are some key differences which I think are extremely problematic. Number one being there are 37 new presidential powers that have been introduced.
So the problem is not religious.
Well, it is on one. That's just the first aspect that I'd like to address. But secondly, there is a religious issue that, as you said, Article 2 has been maintained, which gives the precedence of Sharia law in the governance of the country. It's something that has previously existed, and many of the Coptic leaders decided not to actually really fight against this provision because it deems that perhaps we can use this as a basis for obtaining certain principles. However, Sharia law can allow us to have principles, but not necessarily govern the country. So I think that's where the point of disaccord is. But an extremely problematic provision is seen in Articles 10 and 11 of the draft constitution. Article 10 gives the state the power to preserve the, quote, genuine nature of the Egyptian family and its moral values. And Article 11 states that the state has power to safeguard ethics and morality. And of course, we can see that this can be extremely extremely subjective. Who is to decide what is moral, what is acceptable? We've seen in other republics where Islamic parties have seized power, such as, in Saudi Arabia, where you have Islamic law governing, the formation of groups which actually go out and monitor people's conduct to make sure it is Islamic enough or in accord with the principles of Sharia, which are extremely subjective. And one other problem that we see is women's rights in this issue. Here, women are lower to status, lower than men, because they are viewed in their context as members of a family. We're deciding whether they correctly play their role in the family rather than their role as equal citizens to any other citizen who is a member of the Egyptian population. So there are many problematic provisions with this draft constitution, not to mention the fact that the composition of the council is not egalitarian, is not representative of the society as a whole.
Abdul Mawgood Dardari, your thoughts on this new constitution? Does it, further to the points made by Shireen Foti, endanger the rights of minorities, most notably women?
Not at all. Let me make a blanket statement. It is very unfortunate that, with all due respect to to at least the two guests who spoke before me, there is still buying into the undemocratic, secular and liberal agenda of few Egyptians who do not represent more than 5 to 7% of the population. I don't know why people like to do unfair representation to the constitution. Saying that women are lower than men, that is unfair. That is not right. The constitution is stated very clearly in more than one article. You see, there were few articles on women previous constitution. Now all articles apply to men and women alike. So you coming now and saying they're treated as, that is not right. That is unfortunately an unaccepted statement if you read the constitution as Egyptians read it. Concerning the previous speaker saying that Morsi represents Allah, that's also strange. You really, Europeans have really to do this paradigm shift to understand that in Egypt, a revolution took place and the voice of the Egyptian people is to be heard from now on. Morsi is elected by the people of Egypt. Morsi represents the people of Egypt, and that is a very important principle. Concerning the demonstration that the Egyptian had in the University of Cairo, it was the largest ever in Egypt in support of the president. What we will see, it's just a matter of 2 weeks, even less than 2 weeks, and you will see the majority of the Egyptian people.
All right, the proof will be in the ballot box. I'm going to have to cut you off, Abdul Mawgood Dardari, because we're going to have to go to a break, but we'll be right back. It's the France 24 debate.